Ladies and gentlemen, today I am here to talk about 2024 being the greatest year in cinema history. We got classics like this, like that, whatever the fuck this was. Now I'm playing. But 2024 was not bad at all for movies. We had a pretty solid year, and I didn't even get to see everything. For those who want to know, I did watch 70 official 2024 movies. So out of 70, I was gonna just pick the top 10, but there were so many good ones that I decided to go with the top 20. So without further ado, here is my personal favorite top 20 best movies of 2024, and obviously there will be no spoilers for any of the movies mentioned on this list. Now real quick, just as a little caveat, if you look up some of these movies, some of them may say that they came out in 2023. That could either be because it premiered at a film festival like Sundance or Cannes and didn't get its wide public release until 2024, or same thing could have happened with it being a foreign film. Let's say a movie came out in France or South Korea in 2023 and it didn't get its wide international release until 2024. I consider those types of movies to be official 2024 releases because I live in the United States. I don't live in France. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with a few honorable mentions, a few movies that I did enjoy, but I just didn't enjoy as much as the big 20, so to speak. These movies include Nosferatu, Evil Does Not Exist, Problemista, The Wild Robot, Longlegs, It's What's Inside, Infested, Juror 2, and Baby Girl. Again, I did like these movies. I would recommend them. I just like the ones on my top 20 a little bit more. Speaking of the main list, let's go ahead and get started. At number 20, I have Conclave, directed by Edward Berger, starring Ralph Fiennes, Jon Voight, and Stanley Tucci. Now, even though in this movie we are following a bunch of cardinals, which are senior members of the Catholic Church, this is very much a political thriller about said cardinals voting on who should be the next pope after the previous one suddenly dies. The story itself is the glue of this movie. Obviously, the acting by the main cast, especially by Ralph Fiennes, is really strong, and also the cinematography. The cinematography is really solid, especially with the lighting and the blocking. Visually, this movie looks stunning, but it is really the unraveling of the story, learning about these characters, trying to understand who they are, who can we trust, who can we not trust, and what are their motives. It also has kind of an insane ending, which I liked. It was just unexpected. It does make sense with the overall theme and the message of the story, and in general, I hope more movies have the sort of balls to pull off endings like this one did. Awesome political thriller. I wouldn't be surprised if we get more political-esque style movies like this in the future, because history has shown that movies are reflections of the times that they came out in, especially when something big happens, like in the 70s when everybody was schizophrenic because of Watergate. We will definitely get more movies that are clearly inspired by real-life events, such as January 6th, because Conclave, you have to watch this movie to understand, okay, I could kind of see where the inspiration came from. In fact, there's a couple movies on this list that definitely seem to be made in response to January 6th. All right, at number 19, we have The Contestant, directed by Claire Titley, starring Nasubi and Toshio Tsuchiya. Also, real quick, I am terrible at pronunciations. There are going to be Japanese movies, Korean movies, French movies on this list, so you are fully warned. The Contestant is the first and only documentary on my list. I didn't watch a whole lot of documentaries in 2024. If there are any you would like to recommend, please drop them down in the comments. I would love to get around to them eventually. But for right now, let's talk about The Contestant. This is one of the craziest, honestly fucked up true stories I've seen in a while. It takes place in the late 90s. We are following a Japanese aspiring comedian named Tomokai Hamatsu, nicknamed Nasubi, which translates to eggplant because he has a really long shaped head like an eggplant. Nasubi lands with what he believes is a dream-defining opportunity of a lifetime, which is the lead role of a reality TV show called Susanoo Danpan Shonen. In this reality TV show, he is tasked with the challenge of staying in an apartment by himself with no food, no communication to the outside world, and no clothes. He literally has nothing in this apartment besides magazines, and the goal of this challenge is to use these magazines to enter in mail-in sweepstakes and survive off the prizes. So let's say if you wanted food, kitchen equipment, blanket, toilet paper, fucking clothes, he would have to win them in a sweepstake. meaning his survival was literally based off luck. Audiences would tune in every week to see how he was doing. And again, mind you, he is by himself, complete isolation, butt-ass naked. There's not even a crew. There's just a camera there recording him 24/7. And the editing team takes the footage and chops it up into the best, I believe, 30 minutes, and they air that by the end of the week. At this point, you're probably thinking, Swans TV, what's the end game? The goal was to make, I believe he had to win 1 million yen worth of prizes, which is about 8,000 US dollars. Mind you, the prizes were bags of rice and toilet paper. This is a gripping documentary with such a unique, fascinating, yet dark story. And as the months go on, you see his sanity slip, obviously. And the audience is just loving it. Some people are protesting it, some people are questioning the morals and ethics of it all. But you see throughout the documentary, he is creating a sort of fandom. And it's just crazy to think that this actually happened legally and ethically. They even got the producer, the guy who ran the show and convinced Nasubi to actually do this. They interviewed him and you hear his side and you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna hear this guy's side. Surely he'll justify this. Surely he'll bring in some sort of moral clarity. And you hear his side and you're thinking, no, he's just Hitler. But yeah, really interesting documentary. Really interesting story in general, especially if you don't know anything about it. I do know that this is already one of the more popular stories I've seen talked about on the internet. But I would recommend this documentary because you not only do you hear Nasubi's side, because they interview him too, but you also do hear the producer's side, which is very interesting to say the least. It's crazier and crazier, and again, like I said, you're just left wondering how the fuck did any of this happen. Alright, moving on to number 18, I have A Different Man, directed by Aaron Schimberg, starring Sebastian Stan and Adam Pearson. Sebastian Stan had a phenomenal run in 2024. Not a lot of people know, but the ones who know, we know. In A Different Man, we are following a man named Edward who has a severely disfigured face, until he gets the chance to undergo some new experimental surgery that will give him a non-disfigured face. And it works. It basically turns him from this to that. And at first he's loving the face until he meets a man named Oswald, who had the exact same facial disfigurement that Edward had prior to the surgery. And once these two characters meet, Edward's world gets just flipped upside down. This is a drama, slow burn, psychological thriller with a little bit of black comedy tone to it. The movie is funny despite the almost dreadful escalating atmosphere it takes, especially in the second half. Sebastian Stan is really good in this movie, and it's not even my favorite performance of his in 2024. We'll get to that later, but he was strong in this movie. However, Adam Pearson steals the show. I remember seeing Adam Pearson in Under the Skin, and I thought he was good in that movie, but he really shines in this one. He plays this very charismatic, charming, at times absurdly charming character named Oswald, and his dynamic with Edward is so good. It's really the meat of the movie. They have this very one-sided relationship where one guy admires the other guy and the other guy fucking hates him. It reminds me of this image right here. Also, this movie is very gorgeous to look at. It's got this super grainy retro 70s look that just adds to the overall atmosphere and also just visually looks beautiful. Just an overall solid psychological thriller. It's an awesome slow burn about insecurity and self-identity. It's funny at times, it's absurd at times. It's also intense and a little unnerving, but it also feels original and just a great watch. Alright, number 17, I got Look Back, directed by Kiyotaka Oshima. We're gonna try that one more time. Look Back, directed by Kiyotaka Oshiyama, starring Yumi Kawai and Mizuki Yoshida. This is the first animated film on this list. It will not be the last. Flowheads, please stay seated. We will get to you in a moment. Right now, let's talk about Look Back. Look Back is unsurprisingly beautiful. I say unsurprisingly because this is an adaptation of the one-shot manga of the same name, written by Tatsuki Fujimoto, the insane man behind Chainsaw Man. I am a fan of Fujimoto. I wouldn't call myself like a hardcore fan because I've only read Chainsaw Man 1 and I'm keeping up with part 2. I haven't read his other works, but I do want to get into them, like Fire Punch and his other one-shot mangas. But I do really enjoy Chainsaw Man, his art style, and just the type of writer he is. It seems like he's really good at taking absurd, sometimes ridiculous concepts and turning them into genuine, touching, emotionally human, gripping stories. However, Look Back is a very grounded story. Again, like I said, I haven't read any of Fujimoto's other works besides Chainsaw Man. I still wouldn't be surprised if this is one of his most grounded stories he's ever told. There's not a whole lot of absurdness at all. There's really not any crazy concepts. Bare bones, this is really just a beautiful, down-to-earth story about two artists growing up and making art. This story is not as insane as Chainsaw Man, but the touching human emotions are still there. And I mean that. There was a girl sitting next to me in this theater. I kid you not, for the latter half of this movie, non-stop crying. Like, I'm not being hyperbolic. For the last 30-40 minutes of this movie, she was constantly crying. This is a beautiful movie. Not just in the fantastic animation, because this is beautifully animated, from papers flying to a girl skipping the snow. It all does look wonderful, but the story itself by Fujimoto is very somber and touching. Your heartstrings will be tugged, and the voice acting really helps accomplish that. The leads in this movie really go hand in hand in creating these characters and bring them to life. Like, they feel quirky but realistic. They feel genuine and you care about them and their goals. And I believe this was Mizuki's first shot at voice acting, so that's a crazy debut, if that's the case. And Yumi Kawai, I mean, both leads really did kill it. The directing was terrific, thank God. We have seen time and time again that no matter how good a manga is, that doesn't mean it will automatically be good when it's adapted to the silver screen. You gotta know how to translate these scenes from pages to the big screen when it comes to pacing, score, voice acting. And I believe this director truly had a vision and accomplished it. He really brought this story to life, and I think that this is one of the rare, strong adaptations we've gotten recently when it comes to manga to anime. Alright, at number 16, I have I Saw the TV Glow, directed by Jane Schoenbrunn, starring Justice Smith and Jack Haven. This is the second feature from Jane. I've seen both of her works. This one and her debut, We're All Going to the World's Fair. I saw that a few months ago, and I wasn't crazy for that one. I did like some elements of it, but I overall didn't connect with it as much as I would have liked to. Maybe I'll give it a rewatch. I'll probably warm up to it now that I know at least what to expect. But I was rocking with this movie instantly. I Saw the TV Glow is awesome. This is a horror movie following two teenagers named Owen and Maddie who bond over a TV show called The Pink Opaque. As they get older, they start questioning their relationship to this mysterious TV show and their own reality and their own existence. It's at that point strange and ominous events begin to unfold. Now, in terms of horror, this movie isn't really traditionally scary on its surface. Like, it's not trying to be The Conjuring or The Shining, but the concept of it is terrifying. I'm not gonna give it away, but this movie is filled with existential dread, especially by the end. Really powerful final act. And the movie as a whole is not too subtle with what it's trying to say. Maybe I'm just online too much, but I found the allegory very obvious, which isn't a bad thing. You don't have to be subtle to be a good movie, Exhibit A. But luckily, movies are art. And with all art, you can come up with different interpretations that may differ from even the artist's intention or perspective, and that's fine, that's valid. It may not be the exact target audience that this movie is explicitly about, but I could still relate to the themes of lost identity and empathize with the horrifying concept behind this film. And I also love the color schemes of this movie too. Everything popped. The soundtrack also popped audibly, which means it's good. I don't know, I just came up with that slang right now on its head. Probably one of my favorite soundtracks of the year in general. Acting from both leads, Justin Smith and Jack Haven, fantastic. Super subtle, but super strong. This is a slow burn, psychological, trippy movie. I would recommend it, especially if you're a fan of directors like David Lynch. Alright, at number 15, I got The First Omen, directed by Arkasha Stevenson, starring Nell Tiger Free and Ralph Ineson. Like I said in my top 10 horror video, this was the biggest surprise of 2024 for me. A big studio making presumably an unnecessary prequel to a classic horror film, and it's actually really good. First Omen is a prequel to the 1976 classic The Omen, and since it is a prequel, you don't need to watch The Omen 1976 or really any other Omen film in the franchise to understand this one. So in this movie, we are following a nun who starts uncovering this terrifying conspiracy that the church has a plan to bring the birth of the Antichrist. This movie has actual effective horror. It's one of the few movies in 2024 I would say actually scared me. Not the scariest movie ever made, but it is a solid horror movie. And that is because it has a very strong sense of tension. This isn't a jump scare festival like Insidious, where it's throwing everything at you 24/7 and it just gets redundant and annoying. No, this movie has great pacing. It knows when to show something scary and how to do it. A few jump scares that are in this movie, they will make you jump, and in between those few jump scares, we're getting scenes that just unfold this disturbing, unnerving mystery that not only keeps the story afloat, but also just adds to the overall sinister atmosphere. Awesome cinematography. A lot of shots, especially at the beginning, are very reminiscent of 1970s cinematography. Again, this is a solid horror movie with a great unnerving story. Not the scariest movie on this list, that'll be mentioned later, but still a great horror movie that I would recommend. At number 14, I have Anora, directed by Sean Baker, starring Mikey Madison and Yuri Borisov. Some of you may think that this is way too low, especially with the Oscars, and this won Mikey Madison an Oscar. I believe this also won Sean Baker an Oscar. I like this movie, I enjoyed it. I do have some little critiques with it, but I still obviously enjoy it. This is in the top 15 of my 2024 list. Sean Baker's back with a banger, no surprise at this point. And in this movie, Anora, we follow a girl named Anora, who is a sex worker who gets the chance to change her life when she meets this rich Russian fuckboy and they decide to get married. However, once word reaches back home in the mountains of Russia, the marriage is put in jeopardy by his parents, who want him to get the marriage annulled. Because they're both like 20, they've known each other for a few weeks at best. Their relationship up until this point has been more transactional, if you know what I mean, and just the overall stigma behind it. This was a great film. It's not what I expected when I watched it. This movie really feels like it has two different parts. The first half feels like this love sequence sort of montage, and the second half feels like this really long scene that just keeps going and going and unraveling. It doesn't drag or overstay its welcome. It just keeps going. The story feels like it 180s us when it hits the halfway point. And that's not inherently a bad thing. I guess my only critique with Anora, second half writing wise, it does feel a bit underwhelming. I know by the end we do get some great characterization and interactions, but there's a big chunk in the movie where it feels like something is sort of missing. A lot of runtime that could have been used to further the story more or develop our characters more. That may happen here and there in a few subtle moments, but it doesn't really happen enough in my opinion. The story doesn't become pointless or a waste of time. From beginning to end, this is still a very entertaining movie. It's funny, it has some impactful moments, the pacing was good, but this is a character-driven story, and I just wish the characters were fleshed out a bit more. Which is a little crazy to say about Sean Baker, because Sean Baker is usually really strong at that. The writing does feel a bit more underdeveloped compared to his other films, but that's probably because his other films I have in a very high regard. I love Tangerine, I love The Florida Project. I do really like Anora. I wasn't blown away by it. But again, it still is in the top 15 of my favorites of 2024. I would recommend it. The acting from the cast is really fucking good. It's probably the best part about this movie. Mikey Madison as Anora completes this movie. She was the glue of this film. This movie touches on misogyny, sex work, and sexism. I saw this movie personally more about class than anything else, especially when dealing with the Armenian characters, but maybe that's just what I got out of it. Either way, strong movie. I love Sean Baker. Let's get to the next one. At number 13, I have a South Korean horror film called Exhuma, directed by Jang Jae-hyun, starring Kim Gyeon and Choi Min-sik. Pronunciations, I'm not, you've been warned. I also talked about this movie in a previous video, my top 10 favorite horror movies of 2024. Go watch that video if you want to learn more details about it. I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but this is the best psychological horror movie of 2024. Absolute masterful craftsmanship in terms of building psychological horror, slow burn dread. The atmosphere in this movie is the glue of this movie. This is a Korean folklore horror film about a crew of gravediggers who essentially dig up the wrong grave. This movie just relies on this eerie ascending sense of doom by this evil that's just surrounding our characters throughout the entire movie. Horror is subjective. What scares me may not scare you and vice versa. However, I would recommend this movie if you're a fan of slow burn horrors like The Shining, Hereditary, The Witch. If you like those types of horror movies, this is right up your alley. Alright, number 12, I have Flow, directed by Gents Zobalatis, starring nobody. There's no actors in this movie. Flowheads, you may now rise up. This is my favorite animated movie of 2024. Granted, I didn't watch a whole lot of animated movies in 2024, but still, nonetheless, this is one of my favorites I've seen last year. Any type of movie, period. In Flow, we follow a cat who recently lost their home in a flood and has to find a new place to live. This cat ventures off in a boat with other animals of different species, and they essentially just go on a little adventure. That's really it. There's no dialogue, like I said, there's no actors, there's no voice actors in this movie. The animals don't speak any human language, they just make their animal noises. And for the most part, the animals just act like actual animals, which is not something you see a whole lot in a family-friendly animated movie about animals. They usually have more human characteristics. Through body language, you can tell that these animals are more emotionally intelligent than the average animal in this movie. What makes this film stand out, besides the best aspect of the movie, which is the animation, other than that, it's really the wonder that this film radiates. Like, you have these grand statues of animals throughout this entire movie. You see no people, but you see human statues, and you also see towns with nobody in it. It really helps add to the imagination of the world building, especially because nothing is really explained. You're just there for the ride, trying to piece together what this world has to offer, and that's literally just the backdrop. It just reeks of imagination, and it reminded me of the feeling I got as a kid when I would watch Spirited Away. The beautiful animation along with the serene score really helps add to that wonder that this movie is able to capture. There's a moment near the beginning where the cat is running on the statue trying to avoid this rising flood, and it's sunset, and you see the sun setting, and you see this massive whale thing kind of rise out of the waves, and with the score at that exact moment, it was so beautiful. I was thinking, oh fuck, I'm watching a classic, aren't I? Deadass, the only word to describe it is magical. The movie is obviously cute and funny with its animals acting like animals, but it's also heartbreaking at times. It really does pull on your emotions. There are moments where you're angry, there are moments where you're sad, there are moments where you're anxious, you're like, oh my god, are they gonna survive this? And again, it's really just a cat and a few animals going on a boat trip. It's such a simple but effective story. It's short, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it is really pretty to look at. And it's heartwarming. This is the type of movie that I feel like anybody of all ages can just fall in love with. Alright, at number 11, I have The Apprentice, directed by Ali Abbasi, starring Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong. One of the most ballsy movies of 2024 easily, and of course it got shunned and blacklisted. This is a biographical drama about Trump and his rise of power in the 70s and 80s in the real estate world that eventually turned him into the man that we know of as today. What I love about this movie is that it humanizes Trump. It doesn't paint him as this godlike hero that some of his most devoted followers would like you to think he is, and it also doesn't paint him as this cartoonishly evil monster that was born without empathy like some of his biggest haters would like you to think. This movie explains the idea of a powerful businessman, the shark who had to eat the other sharks to make it and thrive the way that he did, the mindset that that person may have. What can make someone have a mindset like that, and how does that person react to power, and how do they grow it? This entire movie takes place before his presidency, and it shows the good and bad that he has allegedly done. You can call it a hit piece, sure, but the things that were alleged by family, by friends, by close friends, close partners that worked with him for years and years. But, you know, maybe all of them are lying and only Trump tells the truth. There are scenes in this movie that are disturbing. You know the one I'm talking about if you've seen this film. But even besides that one, there's a dinner scene near the end that just straight up feels like a horror movie. The directing in this movie is so good. The story is fluid, it flows. Bare bones, this is just a character study of a businessman, but the writing is just so captivating and just keeps you engaged. You're just glued. You're glued to the conversations, you're glued to the pacing, you're glued to the beautiful grainy New York City 80s look. Speaking of which, this movie does have amazing cinematography too. But Jeremy Strong probably gives off my favorite performance of the year. Insane what he was able to do as Roy Khan. The very first shot of him is just so intense, and he has this massive, authoritative, charismatic unhinged presence about him. And Sebastian Stan gives off my favorite performance he's ever done as Donald Trump. I'm so glad he didn't just do a Trump impression. Shane Gillis as Trump is funny, and he does a very good Trump, but if you were to see that type of impression, that type of role in a movie like this, it will take you out because you're thinking, wow, this guy's doing a great Trump. It feels like an actor playing a character. This movie, it felt like a true, genuine human being. If Sebastian Stan did a one-to-one exact impression of Trump, it wouldn't work in this story because this story requires our emotional investment. We have to take it serious. At the back of our heads, we would just be thinking, wow, that's a great Trump impression, just constantly judging it. This movie, even though he doesn't try to do his voice exactly, he gets his mannerisms and his charisma down to a T. It's a phenomenal movie. Shame it got blackballed. I don't care who the president is. I think that's very dangerous and gross for anyone in a government position of power to dictate what films should be publicly released or not. This could have been a mockumentary about Obama publicly praising Pol Pot. I don't give a shit. It should have came out. I don't care who you voted for, but I just think everyone should agree, leave the movies to the movies. Alright, so at number 10, we have Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, directed by George Miller, starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth. George Miller might be the GOAT for this one. He is 79 years old, and about 10 years ago, he decided to shit on every single action director in the business by dropping arguably the greatest action film of the 21st century. That is Mad Max Fury Road. I'm not being hyperbolic, and I'm not jumping on the bandwagon opinion. In fact, when I first watched that movie a few years ago, I don't know why, but it didn't really click with me. However, in anticipation of watching this film, Furiosa, I rewatched Fury Road. When did I rewatch it? Sometime in early 2024, I rewatched that movie. Don't ask me what happened. Maybe I changed, but everything just clicked. Some of the greatest, straight to the point, intense action sequences I've ever seen put to film, and I loved every second of that movie. So after that rewatch, I was super excited for Furiosa, and although it does deliver, I do like Fury Road a bit more. However, on that point, I do think Furiosa does do a few things a bit better. The story, for one, is much more focused and layered. It's not just this one massive car chase sequence from beginning to end like Fury Road. That works in that type of movie, but for this film, you could tell George Miller was going for a different route. He wants us to be more emotionally invested into the story, into these characters. They're better written and frankly more interesting. We spend the first hour of this film following our protagonist as a child. It's basically one huge flashback sequence, but it's really good. It's well written, it's intense, and it adds so much to the overall story and to our characters. The costumes, although solid in Fury Road, they were noticeably more creative and imaginative in this movie. It overall really does help with the immersion of the world building, even at a subconscious level. Speaking of world building, let's talk about the villain of this movie, and that is Chris Hemsworth as the psychopathic Australian Dementus. He is so good in this movie. He plays one of these roles where you're just glued to the screen the moment he walks in. He steals basically every scene. Unhinged, charismatic, just all the little tropes you love to see in a solid psychopathic villain. The action was top tier in this movie. It wasn't the toppest of tiers like Fury Road, but then again, there's only like probably one or two movies in the 21st century that could even stand to be in that conversation. Still phenomenal in this movie. Like, the action sequences in this film put entire franchises to shame. However, I did notice that there was a much more bigger usage of CGI in this film. I'm not a CGI hater. However, when your movie uses so much practical effects for the explosions or the car chases or the car crashes, it really does become more noticeable in a sort of bad way when you start implementing a lot of CGI, because you could just kind of ping it. And it sucks you out for a moment, but that's really a minor nitpick. The cinematography is also improved in this film. Overall, Furiosa just has a stronger artistic vision. Highly recommend this movie. Definitely my favorite action film of 2024. Coming in at number 9, I have The Order, directed by Justin Kurzel, starring Jude Law and Nicholas Hoult. This is easily, I would consider, the most underrated film of 2024. I've seen nobody talk about this movie. I didn't see Film Twitter talk about it. I didn't see my uncle talk about it. And it's crazy because out of this entire list, out of the top 20, there's a film for really anybody. Like, the art house kids are probably gonna gravitate towards Anora. voice crack, gravitate towards Anora. Should I leave that in there? Fuck. I'll leave it in. I don't give a shit. The horror heads will probably gravitate towards Exhuma or the First Omen. There's something really for everybody. However, I think this movie is the type of film that's just all crowds would love it, if that makes sense. Like, it's easily digestible. This is a thriller based on a true story about an FBI agent investigating a string of violent robberies in the 80s. That investigation leads him to find the Order, which is a white supremacist terrorist organization who plans on overthrowing the US government. Yes, this is a true story. Filmmaking wise, it's solid. It's well shot, it's well acted. Obviously, this is a top 20 films of 2024, so every single movie is probably gonna have those aspects shared. Those things aside, let's talk about the greatest thing, what this movie has to offer. And that is, I would say, the pacing and the writing. This is a super intense cat and mouse cop versus criminal type thriller that just continues to escalate. This is what Rebel Ridge should have been, in my opinion. It's almost like a mix of Michael Mann and David Fincher, a great balance of intensity and stakes and character writing, while also dealing with very real world dark themes and situations. I really do feel the intensity of this cat and mouse chase because you care about the characters. They feel realistic and interesting. Speaking of characters, the antagonist, played by Nicholas Hoult, chilling performance. He plays this patriotic, do-or-die, cunning, evil terrorist, and like I said, it's chilling because not only does he play it to a T and you really believe this character, it's eerie because there are people in the real world that genuinely gravitate towards this insanely sinister and dangerous ideology. Again, I really recommend this movie to anybody, but especially if you're into the crime thriller genre. Alright, number 8, we have La Chimera, directed by Alice Rohrwacher. That was probably really bad pronunciation, I apologize. Starring Josh O'Connor and Isabella Rossellini. This is the same director of Happy as Lazzaro, which I have yet to see. I've heard nothing but good things about that film. I myself cannot confirm that. However, I can confirm La Chimera is easily one of the most, I know I've said this word a lot, but it is one of the most beautiful movies I've seen this year. I mean, it's at number 8. This is an Italian film following a band of grave robbers going around Italy, robbing graves and taking whatever treasures they can find. Now, granted, I didn't think I'd be able to sympathize with a group of characters that do things like that. However, not only did I sympathize with them, I really connected with them, especially the protagonist. Everybody in this movie just feels so flawed, but not in a nihilistic way. They just feel genuinely human. We're following this band of misfits led by the very troubled Arthur, played magnificently by Josh O'Connor. Shout out Josh O'Connor. This is not going to be the last time I mention his name on this list. I love you, challengers. Anyways, back to La Chimera. Arthur, the character that he plays, is just such an interesting character. As the movie goes on and we learn more and more about him, we start sympathizing with him more and just really understand why he is the way that he is. I wish there were more words to describe this film besides beautiful and genuine and human, but I think that those are the best ways, the best words to describe this movie. It's about loss and love and relationships and just finding your path. Very slice of life. Some people may call this one of those vibes movies where there's no plot. Although there is a plot in this movie, if you want to call it a vibes movie, it is the perfect vibes movie. Alright, at number 7, I have The Substance, directed by Conclave, starring Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. I already have a full spoiler-free review of this on the channel. I talked about this movie in my top 10 favorite horror of 2024. I'm gonna keep this very short and brief because this video is already super long. This is a wildly entertaining movie from start to finish. The pacing is one of the strongest aspects of this film. I don't even think its biggest haters can argue that it's boring. Very fun, grotesque body horror movie that just continues to get crazier and crazier. Super creative, disgusting practical effects with a very memorable, hard-hitting score that just matches the energy. Despite its dark subject matter, it's able to balance the tone consistently between the horror, the dark comedy, and just the absurdness of it all. Well shot, I love the color scheme of this movie. It's wonderfully acted, especially by Demi Moore, which is arguably the best performance she's ever done. Really crazy movie, I promise you won't be bored. Again, if you want to know the specifics of why I love this film, I have a full spoiler-free review of this already on my channel. Watch that, but I, of course, would recommend it. One of my favorites of the year, easily. Alright, at number 6, I have Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino, starring Josh O'Connor, Mike Feist, and Zendaya. So Luca dropped 2 films in 2024. He dropped this movie and Queer. I didn't get a chance to see Queer, so I apologize if you're expecting that movie on this list. I will see that soon. However, let's talk about Challengers. Challengers is easily in my top 2 of his whole filmography. I love this movie. I feel like it's so different from his other works. This movie, first of all, it had an amazing energy. The pacing was electric. It had a very similar momentum and energy to The Substance, and that's probably due to Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. They were able to craft this already iconic, intense, mesmerizing techno score that just adds to the overall energy and the soul of this film, like what the score of The Substance did to that movie. So Challengers follows a sort of disjointed love triangle. You have a tennis player coached by his wife, joining a challenger event where he finds his opponent is his former best friend from way back in his college days. And that former best friend was also the former boyfriend to the wife. Triangle. The main story takes place over this one tennis match between the husband and the ex-best friend, ex-boyfriend. Throughout this match, we get loaded flashbacks of them and the wife throughout the last 13 years, seeing their dynamics change and their relationships between each other change, the secrets that went on between them, and everything else that just led to this moment. The story of these characters and this triangle is legitimately captivating and fun to watch. Everyone is just messy and not being upfront about their feelings, and it is really interesting to see what this movie has to say about sex and relationships. And again, the score, my god. And it also has some of the coolest shots you can find in any 2024 movie, especially that ending sequence. That final scene, that final 2-minute scene, that's real cinema. Ladies and gentlemen, we have finally made it to the top 5 of my 2024 list. At number 5, we have The Brutalist, directed by Brady Corbet, starring Adrian Brody and Guy Pearce. Seeing this in the theater was probably my favorite film experience in 2024. It was either that or my number 3 spot. Watching The Brutalist felt like I was watching some grand American epic, like how somebody must have felt when they first watched Once Upon a Time in America way back in the 80s. And it didn't feel fake or pretentious or forced or empty. This movie felt like something special. The moment it starts, it doesn't let go despite its behemoth 3-hour, 30-minute runtime. Again, without going into any spoilers, let me describe the opening scene. The opening scene of this movie, we're following our protagonist, Adrian Brody's character, in this super crammed, crowded, dark room. It's poorly lit. There's a lot of movement going around. And also there's this narration from a woman speaking in a different language. You hear this creeping score in the background along with this narration. Again, darkly lit room, crowded. You don't really know what's going on. We're following our character for like 2, 3, 4 minutes with this long, unbroken shot. People are yelling and you're starting to piece together, okay, he's on a boat, he's immigrating, and he just reached America. This goes on for like 4 minutes, and again, it's so controlled but chaotic, it's mesmerizing. We finally make it to the end of this boat, and as soon as the doors swing open, we're blinded by the sunlight, and the score just burn, 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 boom. I kid you not, the moment I heard that score blast the speakers and we follow our character to the outside world and the camera pans up and we see the upside down shot of the Statue of Liberty, I was like, oh shit. Oh, I'm watching a classic. There's no other way to describe this magical feeling besides this is cinema. And that energy just stays with you. It's so consistent throughout the entire film. It's a solid, great story. Some of the best acting Adrian Brody has ever done. Guy Pearce as well. Easily one of the most standout performances of 2024. Costumes and set pieces, criminally underrated. I haven't seen enough people talk about that. That really does help add to the grand American epic feel of this movie. It really helps make this movie feel so monumental, obviously besides the score and the acting and the writing. This movie was shot in VistaVision, which was a film format used way back in the 50s and 60s to create higher resolution, more detailed images. I believe Hitchcock used that for some of his films. I think The Brutalist is like the first movie in 60 years to use it. Phenomenal, breathtaking, beautiful movie. Probably the best cinematography of 2024 besides my number 2 spot. Again, I cannot praise the score enough. Just a phenomenal, grand movie in general. Alright, so at number 4, I have Oddity, directed by Damien McCarthy, starring Carolyn Bracken and Gwillem Lee. Last horror movie to talk about on this list. I've already talked about this in my top 10 favorite horror 2024. I know I sound like a broken record, I'm sorry. I just want to mention that just so you know why I'm keeping this summary very brief. This is easily the scariest movie I've seen of 2024 by a mile. Now, when I tell people this is the scariest movie of 2024, for some reason their mind goes straight to nihilism. They think they're gonna watch some really dark, fucked up, full of despair horror movie. That's not the case. You don't have to be this darkly twisted, sinister, evil horror movie to be scary. What makes this movie so scary is the masterful directing by Damien McCarthy. Superb craftsmanship in terms of building suspense and tension. This is a perfect example where you don't have to tell this super dark, bleak story to make a very effective, terrifying, scary movie. Story-wise, it's really just a ghost story with elements of witchcraft. What makes this movie so scary is how the scenes play out. There are jump scares in this movie, and usually I know people hear jump scare, they think red flag, they think Blumhouse, they think, oh, dog shit movie that's just gonna be annoying and redundant. I do not like jump scare festival movies, but I do not think that jump scares are inherently a bad thing. It just depends on how you use them. Are they gonna be dog shit and annoying, or are they gonna be effective and actually make you jump and feel uneasy throughout the rest of the movie? I've seen more horror movies than any other genre. It's probably my favorite genre. I cannot give this movie more praise. It had me jumping the theaters multiple times. This movie will take 5 minutes just to build up this perfect sense of tension, I didn't snap right, but just to get you. The cinematography, the acting, the set pieces, the gothic modern set pieces, everything about this movie, phenomenal. My favorite horror movie of 2024, couldn't praise it enough. Alright, at number 3, I have Dune Part 2, directed by Denis Villeneuve, starring Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for the people's true Oscar winner. Not a whole lot can be said about this movie that hasn't already been said, besides cinema is back. Denis has been one of my favorites, if not my favorite modern director. I just love the way he chooses to have his films shot and edited. I think he has a great sense of pacing and mood and tension. I love the scripts he picks up, and overall just has my favorite directing style currently. From Prisoners to Sicario to this, just utterly fantastic. Kind of ironic I say that because when I first watched Dune in theaters, I remember I liked it, but it was one of those movies where I could instantly tell, okay, good movie. Definitely my least favorite from your filmography. Problems I had with Dune 1 were all solved by Dune Part 2, and the pros of Dune 1 were only elevated in this film. Greg Fraser is definitely becoming one of the better cinematographers out there right now. With his work on the Dune movies and Batman, he also did Killing Them Softly, which I had no idea till right now. Dune 2 is easily top 3 best looking movies of 2024. It's really neck and neck with The Brutalist and my number 2 spot. Just gorgeous looking film, especially in the opening sequence when there's a sunset on Arrakis and everything's blood orange and there's like a sniper battle going off. Oh my god. When they started flying, when they started floating, that's when I knew cinema's back. Hans Zimmer and the Screaming Lady were in their bag yet again with another banger soundtrack. This movie fleshes out our characters a lot more, and the stakes just feel higher. The writing is also just more fluid and focused, and that's because Denis is not restrained by focusing on the world building and trying to get the audience to understand the politics of this universe. That's been said and done in Part 1, and now in this movie we can really focus on the meat of the story and everything pays off. Not to mention the acting from this powerhouse cast. We got Austin Butler, who is a scene-stealing villain. We got Rebecca Ferguson, who is a scene-stealing side protagonist. And Timothée Chalamet gives his best performance, yet arguably better than Call Me By Your Name. Visuals of the worm and the battle sequences, I won't be surprised if this movie is remembered as a staple for sci-fi CGI effects. And I'm talking staple like one of the best in the 21st century. Alright, for my number 2 spot, I have Nickel Boys, directed by Ramel Ross, starring Ethan Heresy and Brandon Wilson. Apologies again if I mispronounced it. Okay, so this movie, along with my number 1 choice, has some of the most impactful, emotionally devastating scenes you'll see all decade. For different reasons. It's a type of film where when the credits roll, you kind of just sit there feeling deflated. Which I love because that means I watched something I truly connected with. I watched something that felt powerful to me. So Nickel Boys follows 2 African American boys who get sent to an abusive reform school in 1960s Jim Crow era Florida. And again, powerful and devastating. Don't do this movie justice. Despite saying that and the obvious heavy subject matter that is in this movie, this is not a bleak 24/7 depression misery porn film. Yes, the situation that they're in and in general the world at the time was extremely fucked up and cruel and dystopian. This movie still makes room for the human moments, specifically the friendship and the camaraderie and the growth between our 2 lead characters, which makes the suffering that they endure from the hands of systemic racism all the more harder to stomach. You could have very much shown the most extreme cases that really happened in this era, but this movie doesn't. It hints at it, but it doesn't beat you over the head with it. Like, the movie still shows abuse, but they aren't shoving torture scenes down your throat like they could have. They show, for lack of a better word, the perfect amount. The perfect amount to appropriately not only tug at the heartstrings, but to effectively tell this story. This entire movie is shot in a first-person perspective, and it bounces between our two lead characters' POVs. I feel like that's such an achievement in itself for how they were able to pull this off and not let it be a barrier to get immersed in this story. And off the dome, I do understand if you think that's just a gimmick, or you may think it could overstay its welcome quite quickly, or just become annoying. In my opinion, it doesn't do any of that. Even without acknowledging the narrative reason and the choice of the POV, this is easily probably the best looking movie of 2024. I think it is a hair above The Brutalist and Dune 2. I cannot underestimate how beautiful this movie looks. There's a moment in the first act where our protagonist gets on a train, and there's like a 1-minute montage where we see from his POV the train just traveling and going by. It was at that moment where I legitimately thought to myself, this is gonna be a masterpiece. That's when everything clicked. The acting from both leads was so phenomenal. Some of the side characters give off insanely great show-stealing performances too. Beautiful movie with some haunting images and sequences. Just an overall very powerful and important film. Alright, so for my number one favorite movie of 2024, I have Smile 2. I'm just kidding, it's Red Rooms. Red Rooms, directed by Pascal Plante, starring Juliet Gariepy and Laurie Babin. My favorite movie of 2024. Technically, it came out in 2023, but it came out only in Canada. It did not get its United States release until 2024, so of course I consider this a 2024 release. This is a Canadian-French psychological slow burn horror thriller that follows a woman who is obsessed with a high-profile case involving an alleged serial killer. Now, the defendant of this case is being charged with the barbaric and brutal murders of 3 young girls, and doing it via a live stream. 2 recordings of 2 victims have been discovered and confirmed. However, the 3rd recording of, I believe, the youngest victim, less than 10 years old, that video has not been found. Our protagonist, who is obsessed with this case, journeys off to find that video. This movie is not graphic at all. It doesn't show any of the violence, but what's being talked about and what's being implied, it still makes this probably the most gut-wrenching, chilling movie of 2024. Absolutely horrifying. It's not horrifying like Oddity or The Shining or Hereditary, but more in a Seven, Zodiac, Memories of Murder type of horrifying. The directing in this movie, I would argue, is legitimately perfect. It takes a very dark subject matter and tells its story in such a mature way without being edgy or poor taste about it at all. The story and the writing, everything is so effective. It feels so real and cold, and it just stays with you long after the credits. I don't even want to say anything more because, one, I did talk about this movie in more detail in my spoiler-free review. Surprise, surprise, in my top 10 horror video 2024. But I just urge everybody to seek this film out, especially if you're into movies like Zodiac, Prisoners, or any of the other movies I mentioned earlier. This will get under your skin in the best of ways. Phenomenally creepy, eerie, perfect paced, slow burn, psychological horror thriller. Not only is this my favorite movie of 2024, as of right now, it's probably my favorite movie of the decade. It is a French film, so if you don't like subtitles, I apologize. Still, one of the greatest films I've seen in a long time. Highly recommend everybody watch this. Alright everybody, now, at this point, you may be saying, Swans, get real. What about this movie? What about that movie? Here is a list of all the 2024 movies I've seen, all the movies that became available to watch in the United States in 2024. These are all the ones I've seen. Again, a lot of bangers. I could have easily made a top 30, but I thought that would be a little too much. Now, unfortunately, I did not get to watch everything. There are plenty of films I did not get a chance to see. Plenty of films that have gotten nothing but praise that I will eventually watch, but I did not want to postpone this video much more longer than what it already has been. Now for this YouTube channel, I am sorry for being inconsistent. I really do want this to work out. Film is my life. I've loved movies since I was a kid. I've just been so busy. Yes, I have a job. Yes, I have a girlfriend. Yes, she has a big ass butt. There are no excuses. This is my dream and I do want this to work out, so I will again try to be more consistent. I will probably be doing much more fun videos like tier lists or just ranking filmographies. Either way, this channel will be pumping out more content, I promise. My life is literally movies. Throughout this little break that I did, I'm still watching movies. In fact, here's a look right now about the 2025 movies I've seen this year, and I'm already ranking them. and so far it's not looking good. Either way, I'm so happy we hit 500 subs. The next goal is obviously to hit 1,000. Hopefully we can hit that by summertime. But as always, thank you again for watching, and I will see you at the next one.